let me know.
It's all good. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Friday Night Forum. We're in slightly different surrounds. Firstly, you can see us at all. That's a bit different to the normal X-Space format we use. And secondly, we are live in situ. We're at the Geelong Duck Hunting and Shooting Expo. And we've been here all day, well, since about 2:30 getting set up and since about 5:30 when the doors opened. And I'm here with a very special guest, Paul Barker.
Jordan, thanks for having me.
My pleasure, mate. Welcome. It's great to have you back on the barricades.
Yes, here we go.
Indeed. We're saddled up again, getting the band back together. So, but for the people that don't know what I'm talking about, we basically had a very exciting announcement today. I flagged it a little bit earlier in the week that we'd be getting a candidate announcement. And Paul, as some of you would know, is a sitting Surf Coast Shire Council councillor. He was re-elected recently on a Back to Basics platform. And Paul actually ran for Corangamite at the last federal election in 2022. And immediately after that election, I'm sure he was swearing to himself he'd never do it again, and he's learned his lesson. And, you know, once burnt, twice shy. But
glutton for punishment.
3 years can, you know, make people forget a lot of bad memories. And so Paul's back at it again, back in the saddle and running again for the electorate of Corangamite. So I'm stoked. Paul was actually one of the first candidates I met outside of the Bendigo electorate where I was living at the time. When I sort of re-engaged with politics back in 2022, you guys have heard me talk about how
Sorry for that.
It wasn't your fault. It was definitely Angus and Chloe and Lockie's fault.
Yeah.
If you guys are watching now, you know who you are. I was a bit of a Obi-Wan Kenobi sort of political self-imposed exile, minding my own business and trying to forget about politics. And, you know, like in the immortal words of the Godfather, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back. So, Paul, tell us a little bit about Corangamite as an electorate, if people don't know.
So historically, it captured the Bellarine and a whole bunch of far western parts of rural Victoria, past Geelong. But as populations have gotten bigger in this area, that electorate has become smaller and smaller.
Yeah, so Corangamite used to be, the western limit of Corangamite used to be a little bit west of Colac.
Yes.
And it was sort of like a mix of, I suppose, regional, city and rural. It was sort of like a mixed composed electorate. And when did that sort of change to encompass Torquay instead of Colac? What year was that?
As the years have gone on, it was probably about 10 years ago, so I started capturing that. But then nearly every election cycle, it's gotten smaller and smaller to now to the point where it's pretty much Torquay up to Grovedale, across to Newcombe and the rest of the Bellarine.
You sort of see a day where it might be the border is the river. Might be the
Maybe.
Yeah. You might encompass a bit of Highton and all that. Yeah. But so yeah, look, I was born in Geelong. I've sort of grown up in the Ballarat area in the Golden Plains Shire, which is probably as close to Geelong as anywhere. And so Geelong's somewhere I've got a special place for in my upbringing, and a lot of my family and stuff are still in this part of the world. How long have you been in the electorate for?
I've been living in Torquay since about 2017, and moved down to be a full-time skydive instructor. Then got a different job in Melbourne to be a skydive instructor. So I've done the commute from Melbourne to Torquay and the commute from Torquay to Melbourne. But then as things have evolved, I've gone back to trucking and been handyman, mowing man. And
Well,
all
I know
sorts.
from a podcast you did earlier today that the person who was interviewing you shared with me that we definitely don't have time to go into Paul's full job history because today's Friday Night Forum is going to be bound by the light. We're going to be living in harmony with nature tonight on the stream. So when you can stop being able to see us, that's when we're going to stop. It's beautiful. It's like one of the last kind of long days of the end of summer, I think, and this is a beautiful time to be in regional Victoria. It's
Definitely.
not horribly, I mean, it's probably horribly cold in Ballarat where I live, but
Yes.
it's really, really lovely and mild today. So tell me a little bit about your experience last time running for Corangamite at the 2022 federal election. How did you go and what did you learn from your first crack?
So how'd I go? 2.5% of the first preference vote, which for a first hit out, I think is pretty good. It was an 8-month campaign, a lot of work. This campaign is not going to be anywhere near that amount of time. I've just had too much on the boil. But I'm very optimistic that we'll be able to improve on that 2.5% quite well. Because just the support I've been getting around, as you know, I'm on council and I've done a few things there that's connected me to so many people, and whether it's standing up for property rights or hunters or a whole host of other topics that come through council, the network of influence has just continued to increase. And now that we've got a name of Libertarian as opposed to Liberal Democrats at the last election, I think that's going to give us enough of a differentiation that any confusion with the Liberal Party from last time, which was actually a hindrance, is actually going to be a positive.
And I mean, like, for people who don't know the whole story, it's basically the Liberal Party used lawfare against us to force us to change our name from what it was, the Liberal Democrats, to a different name. Well, we were deregistered as the Liberal Democrats. And the irony of what Paul's just said, which is that we were sick of being confused with the Liberal Party. We were constantly having to try to get past that initial gut response people would have when they'd see the first, word Liberal in the name. They'd be like, oh, no. And then sometimes they'd double take and come back and go, oh, you're not the Liberal Party. So the Liberal Party thought that our intention was to be confused with them to benefit us, but it was actually harming our ability to have conversations with the electorate. And I know from a couple of by-elections we've had since we've had the new name, awareness is still always a problem, but at least we're not also having to explain who we're not.
Yeah. And just for the 22-year history in 5 seconds, we were the Liberal Democrats because we were Liberal compared to the Australian Democrats, and then the Liberal Association just got out of hand. But here we are.
Yeah,
we're
that's right.
properly named and we are mature. We're doing well. And I know Kathy's got a question about New South Wales. If you follow the Libertarian New South Wales accounts, you'll be able to get updates about all of their activities.
Yeah, and Kathy, our lead Senate candidate in New South Wales is Craig Kelly. And I think that in the past we have run a candidate in the Wollongong area. But if you hit up the Libertarian Party of New South Wales, in brackets, formerly Liberal Democrats, they're like the artist formerly known as Prince in New South Wales. They want to make sure people know who we used to be. They will definitely let you know who's in your area. And I think they might actually have a website up as well that identifies their lower house candidates.
Yes.
So what did you take away, Paul, from your first run at Corangamite, and what would you do again? What would you do differently this time compared to last time?
What I learned last time is that the grassroots movement is where it's at. Meeting people where they're at, having conversations, either door knocking or out on the street. Some of the marketing that I did, I'd probably change for next time. But really it comes down to donations. So most people would be aware that the major parties get so much money from the voters when they vote and get above that 4% threshold. And minor parties struggle to get that sometimes. And as a result, we're playing with only donations. And that might be a few $1,000s to maybe $10,000 or $20,000 per lower house seat. So that we need to stretch a really long way. And I'm hoping that with the runs on the board that I gained from last election, we'll be able to build on those donations and increase the ability of our capacity to market ourselves through billboards or social media or all the different ways.
Yep, and definitely one of those ways that I think we didn't do a lot of before 2022 because we were still a growing party and really kind of, I suppose, adjusting to those growing pains of gaining a lot of members in a short amount of time. We're actually at an event today, engaging with a stakeholder group, the shooters and duck hunters, and I know that event attendance was not necessarily something we did a huge amount of
Not
back in
back then.
2022. Yeah. So, and in the time since the last federal election,
Well, largely due to lockdowns, like
Yeah,
nothing
of
was
course.
happening.
of course, that's true. Yeah. So the 2022 federal election, you might remember, like earlier that year, there was a sort of like a second mini lockdown that sort of lasted from late 2021 to early 2022. So yeah, so definitely attending events like this, we've had, I think, more events in the last couple of months than we've had in the entire time the party's been around,
Yes.
which has been absolutely
And your
fantastic.
campaign's probably been more than the party's history.
Yeah, well, it's funny because so last time our lead Senate candidate for the federal election was David Limbrick, he was then, and then he stepped away to run it in the Senate. He was one of our upper house representatives. He's still doing that job. And the difficulty with that was that David was quite well known as a person, but he actually had to be really careful and make sure that he wasn't campaigning or running for the Senate at the same time as serving as a sitting state parliamentarian, to make sure that we weren't falling foul of any of the rules around using state resources. So
Similar to what I've got to balance with Surf Coast Council.
Yeah.
And my federal campaign, I've got specific limits where I definitely can't use the council
yes,
as my marketing tool.
yes, absolutely, yeah. And I know with council, when you are basically endorsed as a candidate, there's conflicts you have to declare.
Yes.
But then once you actually are the nominated candidate, once the actual writs are issued, then you have to step away and take a leave of absence.
Yes.
Council, I believe.
Which I'll be doing without pay. So
Yeah.
the ratepayers will not be losing any value for money through that period.
Oh, look, I think the ratepayers are definitely getting good value for money from you as a
They
council.
are. What it says on the pay slip per hour is not correct.
So for those of you who don't know, Paul is a bit notorious as a councillor for finding ways to fix problems when he sees them, which is a really novel thing that you don't normally see in council, where Paul's fixed fences and potholes and bollards, and you'll just see Paul pull over because he's got like a travelling tradie shop almost in his van. And Paul will see something and he'll just sort of try to fix it without really, it's ask for forgiveness, not permission, is definitely the libertarian way. So,
and taking responsibility.
100%, yeah, because sometimes, and we see this often, the biggest problems we have in our society are where something is is not
shared responsibility, which is no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Something is not a specific person's responsibility, so it's basically nobody's responsibility because nobody steps up to take care of it. So basically, you're right. We've been campaigning really since late April last year.
Yeah.
And it's been a funny experience because up until now, I feel like I've almost been running the federal election on my own with nobody else actually running with me or against me or whatever, because not many people are thinking about the federal election that early. But what it's meant is that we've been able to get a lot of things organised. We've got a new rebrand. So we're actually sitting at the back of my So Paul is running for Corangamite. I'm running for the Senate. So so Paul is our lower house candidate for Corangamite. I am our lead Senate candidate. So we're sort of doing the 1-2 punch.
When elected, I would sit in green seats. Jordan would sit in red seats.
That's right. Yes. In the eventuality one day when we have lower house representatives. So basically we're sitting in the back of my campaign vehicle. This is the Libertarian van. And we've got our call flutes here. So we've gone through a big rebrand in the past 3 years. So we've changed our name, we've changed our branding. We've put a huge amount of effort into the grassroots of the campaign. And I think that what Paul said is true. I think minds are really changed in between elections. And the fact that we've been able to have a lot of conversations and really reach out and engage with people before we're asking them for something, I think that has made a big difference.
Yeah. And just simple runs on the board, like whether it's what's happening in state parliament or councils. We've got Libertarians elected in a whole range of number of councils now. And people are starting to see runs on the board. And when they can associate that at one level to another, that's when we're going to make some really good success.
Yeah, they say in marketing that people need about 7 touch points or interactions with a brand before it actually sticks in their mind. And I think there's been a lot more between, as you say, council elections, and in New South Wales, famously, the Liberal Party failed to put in the paperwork on time. So the timeline where Libertarians are the most organised political force on the centre and right of politics is a bit of an unexpected timeline, or not necessarily on everyone's political bingo card.
A sign of things to come.
Indeed, maybe so. That's right. And basically, politics is a little bit like business. When businesses or groups don't have competition, they take their customer for granted and they start just extracting value or wealth. So basically, we think that the major parties and the Greens are a lot like the big supermarkets or the big four banks, where they take your business for granted. They think you'll basically accept a lot of really poor customer experience. So the best solution to that in the Libertarian way of thinking is more competition.
Absolutely.
And lower barriers to entry. So we are all about bringing competition to the majors. And you can tell that they're a little bit worried, I think.
When they make rules to make it harder for us. So historically, federal political parties only needed 500 people signed up on their membership that the AEC would check off to be registered. Then I think it was maybe 6 years ago or thereabouts, they upped that 500 to 1,500, hoping that they'd knock a few out, which they did. But the reality is that the Libertarians, we have way more than enough members to satisfy whatever hurdles they throw at us. So we are going to be here for a very, very long time.
Yeah, when we basically became deregistered after the last federal election because of the laws that were brought in to force the name change. And then when we re-registered about 18 months ago, I think there was a bit of, it was a big win, because a lot of parties that deregister never re-register. And I think that was definitely what the Liberal Party in particular were hoping would happen with us. Because the truth is that we do compete with them for a big section of their voter base on principles. We share a lot of the principles in the Menzies We Believe statement. But unlike the Liberals, who are sort of always trying to form that 51% two-party preferred, they're trying to be a party of government. And as a result, they often compromise on their principles. Libertarians will never compromise on our principles. We'll never support a decrease in civil liberties or freedoms, and we'll never support an increase in taxes. So we have the advantage of being able to be a bit more radical and a bit more pure in our principles. And I think that's a really important role within the political ecosystem for us to fill. So we're almost aiming to be like the sane Greens of the centre and right, trying to drag the Liberal Party further towards a principled position.
And even portions of the left. So what we've been able to do over the years is attract people from the Greens, Labor, Liberal, DLP, WikiLeaks, obviously. And I think we're just going to continue to grow, because we formed that party that really advocates for everyone. As long as you don't harm anyone else, we support you doing whatever you want to do.
Yeah, it's an interesting Venn diagram. And as I've been campaigning and going around and meeting people, so Ash says libertarianism is the only way to move forward. Only need to see how Argentina is going with
Absolutely.
Spot on, Ash. I totally agree. And it's really interesting. As I've been campaigning and meeting people who have been asking for call flute signs like this one to put on their front yard, I've been, for the first time in the recent weeks, I've been really getting a sense of who is following and supporting our campaign. And it's a very different profile of person to what you might think. There are a lot of people who are like blue collar, work with their hands, might have a trade, or they work in services or retail or hospitality, and they drive a car to work. They might, occasionally, or more than occasionally, buy a drink. Some of them smoke, and they're basically paying a huge amount of tax if they're still buying legal cigarettes, which is not a big group of people in Victoria anymore. But these people are Labor's traditional base, living in the regions or the outer suburbs, and they're feeling really abandoned by the Labor Party. So they can't bring themselves to vote for the Liberals, and they don't trust them, and I don't blame them based on the last Liberal government, the Morrison government. But they're just really disappointed and feel let down by the Labor Party. So, and the common theme that these people keep saying is, well, I haven't changed my position. Like, I'm not different to who I was, but the
parties have left them.
The left have left me.
Yeah.
A lot of these people are saying. So, it's really interesting. And I think it does, particularly in Victoria, set us up really well to draw away and differentiate ourselves.
Yeah. We'll just continue. As long as the legacy parties continue to ignore their base, we're just going to continue to build from that.
Yeah, well, they say in business the best thing you can have is a bad competitor. So Melissa says, you do realise that some of your campaign team, Jordan, will also be on Paul's campaign team. I have many sleepless nights ahead. Our volunteers and the people who support us in the Libertarian Party, unpaid, are amazing, and we're incredibly thankful they make the party what it is. We're a genuine grassroots party of volunteers and not paid staff. We are a grassroots movement that exists in the community in between elections. We have monthly branch meetings in about 12 different locations around Victoria, and we're getting up there now in New South Wales branches as well.
Yeah.
And that's the real big difference. And when people come to us from other parties, whether it be the Liberal Party or from other freedom parties that they've been in before, they're really pretty taken aback by how active and how strong our community is. So
and how diverse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of that variety of people that we get from different party memberships and those that are just becoming politically active for the first time, we've got a whole mix of, we've got doctors, plumbers. I was a skydive instructor when I joined. Whole host of different elements. It's really pleasing. Like just some of the conversations and seeing the people interact at branch meetings. It's quite wholesome.
Dad Bosworth, I'm not sure if that's your real name. If it is, great. Hi, Dad. Hi from Ingham, North Queensland. I like what I hear. Keep up the good work.
Excellent.
So, Dad, we've got some terrific Senate candidates working really hard in Queensland. So, Jim Wilmot and Lachlan Lade. Jim's our #1 lead Senate candidate in Queensland, and Lachlan's our #2 Senate candidate. And they are really putting in the hard yards, getting out there on the ground, defending the property rights of Queenslanders. And yeah, it's a really exciting time. We are starting now to get the sun setting, so we're not quite done, but we are definitely, this is like the hook or the gong.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Saturday.
Maybe we can have the listeners chime in with a comment when they can stop seeing us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, let us know when you're just hearing our voices. Although I suppose that's also fine in one way.
They might still see the light in the van as it battery drains.
Yeah, no, the van, I think, will outlive all of us. It's a bit of a weapon. So, funny story about the van. When I started the campaign and we made the decision to get a campaign vehicle from donor funds, we knew we wanted to get a Ford Transit because they've got great panels on the side to be sign written. So some of you will have seen, if you haven't seen, my van has like a number of, it's got my face on the side of it. We've got different panels sign written. And I knew from experience when I was campaigning with the Liberal Party that the Ford Transits were great. Looked up on carsales.com for a Ford Transit, found one that was about 10 grand. It was a bit over 10 grand. It was about like 10.9, something like that. That had, a couple of 100,000 Ks on it. Had done a few city miles, but the ad that was listed said, "Oh, this is a car that has been used to transport canvases for an artist." So it's not like a tradie van where it's been absolutely smashed to death. And with those kind of miles, you just wouldn't even take it out on a big trip on the road for a long distance. And when I called the vendor on the website, so the guy selling the van, I was chatting to him and I said, "Oh yeah," he said, "Oh, what are you going to use the van for?" And I said, "Oh, it's actually for a political campaign vehicle." And there was this kind of awkward pause for about 5 seconds. And I'm like, "Don't worry, we're not one of the bad guys. Like, we're a minor party." I said, "We're the Libertarian Party." And he goes, "Oh, do you guys do Bitcoin?" And so it turned out this guy was a Libertarian Bitcoin adherent. And I just literally almost randomly picked out of the phone book. So that told me that this was the vehicle I had to buy. And that guy who sold me the van, I'll still message him photos of the van and keep him updated with the campaign. And he says, "Oh, you guys have to take Bitcoin donations. You've got to have a Bitcoin policy." And that is something that's exciting to talk about as well. Next weekend, I'll be up in Sydney. I'll be doing a couple of things. I'll be speaking to Joel Jamal on the ARC podcast on Friday, and I'll also be attending the Bitcoin Alive conference, which is the largest conference for Bitcoin in Australia. And we're going to be announcing a dedicated Bitcoin policy, which I think will be pretty exciting for anyone who's into Bitcoin.
Exciting times, like whether in Bitcoin or you just want education choice or lower taxes, like some of the taxes that we've been advocating for abolishing for I don't know how long, they're really starting to hit home now. And like if you look at fuel, Jordan, you went down to Cranbourne the other day and showed the local residents what a libertarian policy on fuel would be like.
Yes.
And It was $1 a litre fuel, no?
Yeah, absolutely. So before Christmas, we went to the APCO in Cranbourne West, and basically we paid for the fuel excise for an hour. So that took fuel prices down from, I think it was like $1.65 or something like that before the promotion started, to 99 cents. So that was pretty incredible. And we had before, it was about 10 minutes before the event started, we had a line around the corner and it was completely packed for the whole hour. We had news coverage from all of the mainstream legacy media news stations. I was on Morning Sunrise, and the whole thing cost us about $5,800, I think, for the hour, but it was an incredible opportunity. And it was also giving some real cost of living relief to locals in that area. And Cranbourne's an area where there are a lot of people doing it pretty hard. So, but all of these taxes like fuel excise, tobacco excise, when people actually pay it, which is not very often, and alcohol excise, they're overwhelmingly taxes that fall on people least able to pay them. They're consumption taxes on things that the lower socioeconomic of society often pay.
Yeah.
So when the government's saying that it's giving you all these tax cuts and tax relief, that almost immediately gets swallowed up by increases to excise tax that are really taxes that we shouldn't be having to rely on.
Definitely.
Yeah, so, all right, it sounds like the event's winding up here and the light's fading. So we're going to go and Ben says, we can tell the Libertarian policies on taxes are starting to be noticed because Bon and UAP/Trumpeter Patriots have started copying the policies like a Mr. Bean skit. Look, they say that flattery is imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So we're happy for our homework to be copied if it means that Australians pay less tax. But if you want the real thing and you want a party that knows that tax reduction and abolition needs to happen on principle, it's not a focus group that we have to consult to do that. We will always vote against restrictions on your liberty, like freedom of speech, and we'll always vote for reductions in taxes.
Absolutely.
So, look, I'm really excited. Like I said, I was stoked when Paul said he wanted to put his hand up. We've got other exciting announcements to come in the next few weeks. We expect that the election will probably be called in the next couple of weeks for any date between the 12th of April and 17th of May. And then the campaign will kick into full swing. So we've got heaps of candidates announced. I think we've got a little bit upwards of a dozen. So almost a third of our seats in Victoria have been announced already, and we've got some more announcements to make. But if you're watching this now or on the recording and you think you might be someone who could be a Libertarian candidate for your federal seat here in Victoria or elsewhere in the country, or you know someone who would be, we'd love to hear from you. So have a look on the website, libertarians.org.au/Vic_Senate, and that's got all the information for my campaign. You can follow me on X at Dittloff4 Senate. And on Facebook and Instagram as Jordan Dittloff Libertarian. Did you want to tell people how they can get in touch with your campaign, Paul?
Yep. So if you search the socials for Paul Barker Corangamite, that'll pop up. If it doesn't, search Paul Barker Torquay or Surf Coast, and I'm sure that'll direct you to where you need to go.
Yeah, you're not a hard man to find.
No.
So, all right, let's go and we're going to clean up all our stuff. We've had a great day here at the Duck Hunting Expo. It's a very friendly crowd for us. They look at our signage and stuff saying less government interference, and they are all about that. So one final thing before we go, it's interesting. This year, there's been a big win for duck hunters where, so Mitch, you absolutely can donate to individual candidates. So ultimately, all lower house campaigns will be supporting my campaign to be elected to the Senate. But absolutely donating to individual candidates' campaigns will ensure that those funds are available for that candidate to buy how to vote cards, call flutes, billboards. And yeah, you absolutely can. Just get in touch with that candidate and their campaign team. And even though that donation will go through to the federal campaign account, so it'll be one account that the donation is going to, but within that account, each candidate has their own ledger to make sure that their donations are available for them to spend.
It's just an accounting process, but as long as you follow the directions that we give, your funds will go to where you desire them to.
But yeah, just so finishing this, so basically the duck hunting community has had a big win this year because they've actually had their duck hunting season extended to a 3-month season, and they can take 9 birds, whereas last year I think it was about 4 or 5. And last year almost saw the duck hunting season cancelled altogether. There was a stacked report in the Victorian upper house that recommended duck hunting be abolished. That was basically stacked out by the Greens and Animal Justice and other bad faith actors. And the government was put under an immense amount of pressure in part because the electrical services union put a huge amount of pressure on the government because a lot of their members are hunters. And even though the people here are really happy that their season's been extended and they've got the result they should have got last year, a lot of them have said to me that they're really disappointed or worried that in Victoria it matters more whether you're an influential union who has relationships with the government than it does if you're a good cause or a bad cause. So we see this time and again with infrastructure and a lot of big government projects. It's very much jobs for mates or policy for mates, and we'd really love to see that change. So we're about to turn into pumpkins now. The sun's dipping below the sky, and we've got to go off and continue the hard work.
Yeah.
But it was awesome to spend a bit of time with you guys tonight to announce Paul's candidacy and watch this space for more.
Lovely.
See you later, guys.
Good night, everyone.